Sarah Bennett had always been fascinated by abandoned places. At 28, this Chicago photographer never imagined her passion would lead her to uncover one of the darkest secrets of her hometown. On an autumn afternoon, Sarah decided to explore the old Ravenswood Psychiatric Hospital, closed for decades due to allegations of unethical experiments. Equipped with her camera and a flashlight, she snuck onto the fenced property. The decaying building exuded an oppressive aura. Sarah entered cautiously, her steps echoing through empty corridors. The air was heavy with the smell of mold and decay. As she walked, she noticed strange marks on the walls, as if someone or something had dragged sharp nails across them. On the third floor, Sarah found a room that made her freeze. Dozens of rusty wheelchairs were arranged in a circle, as if waiting for invisible patients. In the center, a single metal table with leather straps. Her instinct screamed for her to leave, but curiosity pushed her forward. Sarah approached the table, noticing dark stains on the metal. Suddenly she heard a whisper, "Help us." Frightened, she turned abruptly. There was no one. The sound came again, louder. "Please, help us!" Now it seemed to come from all sides. Sarah ran for the exit, but the doors slammed shut violently. The wheelchairs began to move on their own, spinning around her. Tormented voices filled the air, begging for help. Desperate, Sarah shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" A male voice replied, "We are the souls of patients tortured here. Dr. Mortimer used us in horrible experiments. Our bodies are buried under this room's floor." Sarah, horrified, asked, "How can I help you?" "Expose the truth," the voices replied in unison. "Set us free." Trembling, Sarah began photographing frantically. The chairs stopped, the voices silenced. When she finished, the doors opened. She ran outside, barely breathing. At home, she developed the photos. To her astonishment, spectral figures appeared in the images. Patients with tormented looks, a man in a lab coat with a cruel smile. Sarah spent the following months investigating. She discovered that Dr. James Mortimer conducted illegal mind control experiments in the 60s, resulting in dozens of covered-up deaths. With the help of a local journalist, Sarah exposed the truth. Excavations at the hospital revealed human remains, confirming her account. The victims finally received a proper burial. Ravenswood was demolished, but Sarah never forgot that night. Sometimes she still heard whispers thanking her for her courage. The echo of the past had finally silenced, but left an indelible mark on her soul. Mike Hawkins, a 35-year-old writer from Maine, was seeking inspiration for his next horror novel. He decided to spend a week at the abandoned Black Rock Island lighthouse, locally known for stories of mysterious disappearances. Arriving on the isolated island, Mike felt a shiver run down his spine. The lighthouse, an imposing structure of black stone, seemed to be watching him. The interior was surprisingly well preserved, as if time had stood still. On the first night, Mike was awakened by a strange sound, like water trickling. He followed the noise to the base of the lighthouse, where he found a secret door. Hesitantly, he descended a spiral staircase leading to an underground chamber. What he saw paralyzed him with horror. The circular chamber was filled with glass tanks containing a greenish viscous substance. Inside each tank floated a humanoid figure with fish-like features, scaly skin, large membranous eyes, webbed fingers. As Mike watched in shock, one of the creatures opened its eyes, fixing him with an intelligent and hungry gaze. He stumbled backward, tripping over something. Looking down, he saw an old diary. Mike ran back to his room, locking the door. With trembling hands, he opened the diary. It belonged to the last lighthouse keeper, dated 1952. The pages revealed a terrifying story. The keeper, Thomas Blackwood, discovered that the island was a portal to an aquatic dimension inhabited by intelligent amphibious beings. These beings could assume human form for short periods. Blackwood made a pact with them. In exchange for alien knowledge, he would provide human hosts for hybridization experiments. For years, Blackwood lured people to the island, delivering them to the creatures. The experiments failed, creating the beings in the tanks, neither human nor alien, trapped between two worlds. The diary ended abruptly. Mike realized with horror that Blackwood had probably become the last victim of his own diabolical scheme. A noise made him look at the window. Scaly figures were emerging from the sea, crawling towards the lighthouse. Mike tried to use his cell phone, but there was no signal. Desperate, he ran to the top of the lighthouse, hoping to find a way to call for help. There he found an old radio. As he tried to make it work, he heard wet footsteps on the stairs. At the last second, he managed to send a broken message. Help. Black Rock Island. Creatures. The creatures burst through the door. Mike found himself surrounded by beings that were a Lovecraftian nightmare come true. Cold, inhuman eyes studied him with a mixture of curiosity and hunger. The last thing Mike saw was a webbed hand reaching out to him. Days later, a rescue team arrived on the island. Alerted by the strange transmission, they found the lighthouse empty, with no sign of Mike. The only trace was an old diary and an unfinished manuscript titled The Lighthouse's Secret. Authorities filed the case as another unexplained disappearance. The island was declared a restricted area. Years passed. Occasionally, fishermen report seeing strange lights in the abandoned lighthouse and hearing anguished calls from the island. Some swear they've seen half-human, half-fish figures swimming in the surrounding waters. The secret of Black Rock Island remains guarded by the waves and the complicit silence of the old lighthouse, waiting for its next victim. Emma Cortez, a 32-year-old geologist from New Mexico, had always been skeptical about the supernatural. That changed when she agreed to lead an expedition to the abandoned Whispering Rocks mine, closed 50 years ago after a series of inexplicable accidents. With a team of 4, Emma descended into the mountain's depths. The air was dense and the silence oppressive. Their state-of-the-art equipment detected unexplainable magnetic anomalies. On the third day of exploration, they discovered an unmapped cave. The walls glowed with strange phosphorescent symbols. Emma noticed that the symbols seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. While examining the cave, Emma's assistant, Jake, cried out in pain. Something had cut his arm, a sharp rock that no one had seen before. The cut was deep, but Jake insisted on continuing. As they advanced, team members began to hear whispers, indistinct voices that seemed to come from the rocks themselves. Emma tried to ignore them, focusing on scientific data. The next morning, Jake had disappeared. They found his empty sleeping bag, stained with blood. Searches revealed no sign of him. Determined to seek help, they tried to return to the surface. It was then they realized the mine's geography had changed. Tunnels that should lead to the exit ended in dead ends. It was as if the mountain itself was alive, modifying itself to keep them trapped. The whispers increased, becoming clearer. "Stay. Feed us." Emma struggled to maintain her sanity, clinging to logic and science. On the 5th day, another team member disappeared. They found only his boots, filled with a black viscous substance that moved as if alive. Emma and the 2 remaining team members reached a gigantic chamber. In the center, a bottomless pit emanated a pulsating greenish light. The walls were covered with thousands of glowing symbols, now clearly in motion. One of the scientists got too close to the edge. Suddenly, tentacles of living rock emerged from the pit, dragging him into the depths. His screams echoed for seconds that seemed an eternity. Emma and the last team member ran desperately. The tunnels writhed around them, rocks moved like pulsating flesh. The whispers were now screams, begging for sacrifice. When all seemed lost, Emma saw a crack of light. She pushed her colleague through it seconds before the rock closed, cutting off her own arm. Emma woke up in a hospital days later. Authorities found her unconscious at the mine entrance, alone. There was no sign of the others. Her story was dismissed as hallucination caused by toxic gases. Months passed. Emma, now with a prosthetic arm, couldn't forget the horror. Studying local history, she discovered the mine was built over an ancient indigenous sacrifice site. Legends spoke of a hungry entity imprisoned in the mountain, feeding on souls. One night, Emma woke to a familiar sound, a whisper coming from her room's walls. In horror, she saw phosphorescent symbols forming on the plaster. She realized then that she had never really escaped. The mine entity had marked her, and now came to claim its sacrifice. As the walls of her room began to move like pulsating rock flesh, Emma's last thought was that some things are beyond human understanding, and that there are secrets in the depths of the earth that should remain buried forever. Dr. Evelyn Pierce, a renowned 40-year-old forensic psychiatrist, was called to investigate strange occurrences at the abandoned Willowbrook Asylum in Connecticut. The place had a dark history of cruel treatments and unexplained deaths before its closure in the 1980s. Evelyn arrived on a rainy afternoon, the imposing Victorian building casting a menacing shadow. As she walked through decaying corridors, she felt a heaviness in her chest, as if countless eyes were watching her. In the former director's office, she found files detailing unethical experiments on patients. Dr. Malcolm Graves, the asylum's last director, conducted tests with psychoactive drugs, claiming to seek a cure for mental illnesses. Reports indicated that patients developed paranormal abilities before succumbing to total madness. At nightfall, Evelyn heard distant screams. Following the sound, she reached an isolated ward. The cell doors were open, except one. Approaching cautiously, she saw deep scratches on the inside of the door and dark stains on the floor. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. Turning, she faced the translucent figure of a young woman in a blood-stained nightgown. The apparition pointed to the closed cell before disappearing. With trembling hands, Evelyn opened the cell. Inside, she found a diary. It belonged to Sarah, a patient subjected to Dr. Graves' experiments. The pages revealed unimaginable horrors and the gradual development of psychic abilities. The last entry described how Sarah, using her new powers, freed the tortured souls of the asylum, turning them against Graves and his team. But the price was high. The souls remained trapped in the place, unable to move on. As she read, Evelyn felt the air turn cold. Dark shapes began to form around her. Voices whispered in her mind, sharing memories of pain and experimentation. She then realized that the souls had chosen her. They wanted her to tell their story, to bring justice, but to do so, she needed to survive the night. The asylum came to life. Doors slammed, objects flew through the air. Evelyn ran through the corridors, pursued by shadows that alternated between begging for help and threatening her. She reached the old shock therapy room, where she found Dr. Graves' ghost performing his cruel experiments on spectral patients. Seeing her, Graves smiled malevolently. "Ah, another subject for my studies." Evelyn found herself paralyzed, reliving the painful memories of the patients. She felt the agony of experimental drugs, the terror of shock therapy, the despair of confinement. At the height of horror, she remembered her mission. Gathering all her mental strength, she shouted, "Enough! You're stronger than him. You can move on." Her voice seemed to break a spell. The souls of the patients turned against Graves. His ghost was torn apart by spectral hands, disappearing with a scream of agony. A bright light filled the asylum. Evelyn saw hundreds of souls ascend, finally free. The young woman she had met earlier smiled in gratitude before disappearing. At dawn, Evelyn stumbled out of the asylum. In the months that followed, she dedicated herself to exposing the truth about Willowbrook. Her investigation led to the exhumation of bodies, confirming the abuses. Families finally had closure, and the victims were honored with a memorial. The asylum was demolished, but Evelyn never forgot that night. Sometimes, in her dreams, she still heard whispers of gratitude. She knew she had helped heal not only the living, but also the dead. Willowbrook taught Evelyn that there are mysteries beyond scientific understanding, and that sometimes, to heal the present, one must face the ghosts of the past. Lucas Reeves, a 38-year-old film director from Los Angeles, had always sought the perfect location for his next horror movie. When he heard about the abandoned Grand Majestic Theater in Detroit, he knew he had found the ideal setting. The Grand Majestic, once a stage for great spectacles, had closed its doors in the 60s after a series of fatal accidents. Rumors of hauntings had kept the place untouched for decades. Lucas arrived with a small production crew on a cold autumn night. The theater, an ornate structure from the early 20th century, seemed to observe them with its dark windows. Inside, time appeared to have stopped. Dusty velvet curtains, faded seats, and a large crystal chandelier created an atmosphere of grandiose decay. Lucas felt there was something more there, a latent, expectant energy. While the crew set up equipment, Lucas explored backstage. In a dressing room, he found an old script titled The Final Curtain. The ink was smudged as if wet with tears. Flipping through the script, Lucas felt a change in the air. The lights flickered, and for a moment, he saw the reflection of a pale woman in the foggy mirror. When he turned, there was no one. Back on stage, Lucas found his crew agitated. They swore they had heard music and applause coming from the empty theater. The cameras captured inexplicable orbs of light floating through the air. At midnight, something extraordinary happened. The theater lights turned on by themselves, and the sound of an invisible orchestra filled the air. On stage, ethereal figures materialized, actors from a bygone era, ready for their final performance. Lucas and his crew watched, paralyzed, as the final curtain was enacted. It was the story of an actress, Eleonora, who had made a pact with dark forces for eternal fame. The price, the souls of everyone in the theater on opening night. As the play progressed, Lucas realized with horror that they were not mere spectators. They were being incorporated into the performance. Members of his crew disappeared, only to reappear on stage as part of the spectral cast. Lucas tried to flee, but all exits were locked. The theater wouldn't let them go until the play ended. He understood then that they were trapped in an eternal loop, condemned to relive that fateful night repeatedly. At the play's climax, Eleonora, the woman Lucas had seen in the mirror, approached him. With a seductive and threatening smile, she whispered, "Welcome to the cast, director. Your presence here was no accident. We needed new blood for our eternal performance." Lucas felt himself being pulled onto the stage, his essence merging with the theater. He struggled to maintain his identity, clinging to memories of his life. In a flash of inspiration, he shouted, "Cut! The play is over! You're free!" His director's voice, accustomed to commanding sets, reverberated through the theater. For a moment, everything froze. The trapped souls seemed to awaken from a trance. Eleonora screamed in rage, her form contorting grotesquely, but it was too late. The spell was broken. The souls of actors and audience began to break free, ascending in spirals of light. The theater shook, beginning to collapse. Lucas and the remaining members of his crew ran outside, barely escaping before the building crumbled. Days later, investigating the rubble, authorities were perplexed. They found remains of costumes and props from an era long before the theater's official closure, along with the mysterious script of The Final Curtain. Lucas never directed horror films again. His last project was a documentary about the history of the Grand Majestic, honoring the souls that finally found peace. On premiere nights, some spectators swear they see spectral figures applauding in the back of the cinema. The cast of the Grand Majestic, grateful for their story finally being told. Dr. Amelia Foster, a 35-year-old paranormal investigator from Boston, had always been drawn to places with dark histories. When she received an anonymous tip about strange occurrences at the abandoned Blackwater Sanitarium in rural Maine, she knew she had to investigate. The sanitarium, a sprawling Victorian-era complex, had been shuttered in the 1960s following allegations of patient abuse and unethical experiments. As Amelia drove up the overgrown driveway, the looming structure seemed to watch her with its blank, shattered windows. Armed with her EMF detector, cameras, and an unsettling sense of anticipation, Amelia entered the decaying building. The air inside was thick with dust and the lingering scent of antiseptic. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper and abandoned medical equipment. As she explored the ground floor, Amelia's EMF detector began to spike erratically. She followed the readings to a locked door marked Ward 13. Using her lock-picking skills, she managed to open it, revealing a hidden staircase descending into darkness. The basement level was a maze of narrow corridors and small, cell-like rooms. In one room, Amelia found stacks of patient files. Flipping through them, she discovered records of experimental treatments involving sensory deprivation and mind-altering drugs. The most recent files dated from 1965, 3 years after the sanitarium's official closure. Suddenly, Amelia heard a faint whisper echoing through the corridors. "Help us," it seemed to say. She followed the sound, her heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, becoming a cacophony of pleading voices. As she turned a corner, she saw a figure at the end of the hallway, a gaunt man in a tattered patient's gown. When she blinked, he vanished. Pressing on, Amelia found herself in a large circular room. Rusty operating tables formed a ring around a central pit filled with murky water. The walls were lined with observation windows. As she approached the pit, the whispers crescendoed into screams. Ghostly faces appeared in the water, contorted in agony. Amelia stumbled back, her mind reeling. She realized she was standing in the epicenter of the sanitarium's darkest secrets. This room had been used for extreme sensory deprivation experiments, submerging patients for days on end in an attempt to unlock the potential of the human mind. As she turned to leave, Amelia found herself face to face with a spectral figure, a tall man in a doctor's coat, his eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "Welcome, Dr. Foster," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "We've been expecting you. Your mind will make an excellent addition to our collective." Amelia ran, the ghost in pursuit. The corridors seemed to shift and change around her as she fled. Patient spirits materialized, some reaching out to her in desperation, others trying to block her path. She could feel tendrils of psychic energy attempting to invade her mind. Using all her knowledge of the paranormal, Amelia focused her will, creating a mental shield. She found the stairs and raced upwards, the doctor's laughter echoing behind her. As she burst out of the sanitarium, she felt a psychic backlash, as if a tether had been severed. Safe in her car, Amelia tried to process what she'd experienced. She knew she had to expose the truth about Blackwater, but she also realized the danger wasn't over. The sanitarium's spirits were restless, and the malevolent doctor was still there, waiting for new minds to exploit. Over the next months, Amelia delved deep into the sanitarium's history. She uncovered a conspiracy involving government funding for mind control experiments, with Blackwater serving as a black site long after its official closure. The experiments had torn holes in the veil between worlds, trapping the spirits of those who died there. Amelia published her findings, causing a media sensation. When authorities investigated, however, they found the sanitarium mysteriously burned to the ground. All physical evidence was destroyed, but the land remained charged with psychic energy. Amelia never forgot her experience at Blackwater. She continued her paranormal investigations, but always with a newfound caution. Sometimes in her dreams, she still heard the whispers from Ward 13, a reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried, and that the boundary between the living and the dead is more permeable than most dare to imagine. The case of Blackwater Sanitarium became a turning point in Amelia's career, propelling her to the forefront of paranormal research. But it also left her with a lasting connection to the spirit world, a gift and a curse that would shape the rest of her life and work. Jake Thompson, a 28-year-old urban explorer and YouTuber from Colorado, had always pushed the boundaries of danger for his channel. But nothing could have prepared him for what he would discover in the abandoned Hollow Creek mine. The mine, nestled in the Rocky Mountains, had been a booming gold operation until a catastrophic cave-in in 1952 killed dozens of miners. Officially, the mine was sealed and forgotten. However, local legends spoke of strange lights and eerie sounds emanating from the mountainside. Jake arrived at Hollow Creek with his usual gear, cameras, lights, and a cocky smile for his viewers. "Hey guys, Jake the Explorer here, ready to uncover the secrets of Hollow Creek Mine," he announced to his camera as he approached the overgrown entrance. The mine's opening was partially collapsed, but Jake managed to squeeze through. The air inside was stale and thick with dust. His powerful flashlight barely penetrated the oppressive darkness. As he ventured deeper, Jake's excitement grew. This was exactly the kind of creepy location his followers loved. About a half-mile in, Jake came across an old mining cart on rusted tracks. "Wow guys, check this out," he exclaimed, panning his camera around. That's when he noticed something odd, fresh boot prints in the dust leading off into a side tunnel. Intrigued, Jake followed the prints. The side tunnel showed signs of recent activity, modern support beams, electrical cables running along the walls. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, his urban explorer instincts on high alert. The tunnel opened into a large cavern filled with advanced scientific equipment. Computers hummed, and strange, pulsing crystals glowed in glass containers. Jake's mind raced. Had he stumbled upon some secret government lab? Suddenly, alarms blared, red lights flashed, and a mechanical voice announced, "Intruder detected, initiating containment protocol." Heavy doors slammed shut, trapping Jake in the cavern. Panic set in as Jake searched for an exit. That's when he saw it, a massive, circular portal set into the far wall, crackling with otherworldly energy. Before he could process what he was seeing, the portal flared to life. A figure stepped through, but it wasn't human. It stood over 7 feet tall, with gray skin, multiple limbs, and a head that seemed to shift and change as Jake looked at it. The being spoke, its voice resonating directly in Jake's mind. The breach has been contained. Proceed with extraction. More creatures poured through the portal. Jake, paralyzed with fear, could only watch as they approached. One reached out with a tentacle-like appendage, touching his forehead. Immediately, Jake's mind was flooded with images and knowledge beyond human comprehension. He saw the true history of Hollow Creek Mine, how the 1952 cave-in had actually opened a dimensional rift. He learned of a secret organization that had been working with these interdimensional beings, exchanging human test subjects for advanced technology. Jake understood now that he was never meant to leave this place. He would become another volunteer in their cosmic experiment. As the aliens began to drag him towards the portal, Jake made a desperate move. He grabbed one of the glowing crystals and smashed it against the ground. The resulting explosion of energy short-circuited the alien technology. Alarms blared anew as the portal began to destabilize. In the chaos, Jake managed to slip away, running blindly through the tunnels as the cavern collapsed behind him. He emerged from the mine, gasping and disoriented, just as a massive implosion shook the mountain. The mine entrance sealed itself in a shower of rocks and dust. Jake looked at his camera, which had somehow survived the ordeal. He had evidence, shaky, often incomprehensible, but evidence nonetheless. But as he considered his next move, a black helicopter appeared on the horizon, rapidly approaching his location. Making a split-second decision, Jake hid his memory card in a hollow tree before the helicopter landed. Men in dark suits emerged, led by a stern-faced woman who introduced herself as Agent Carter. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice cold, "I'm afraid you've seen things you were never meant to see. You'll need to come with us." As Jake was led away, he glanced back at the tree holding his hidden memory card. He made a silent vow to expose the truth, no matter the cost. In the days that followed, Jake Thompson officially disappeared while exploring an unstable mine. His YouTube channel went dark, his family was fed a cover story, and Hollow Creek became a restricted area. But the truth couldn't be buried forever. Months later, a mysterious video appeared online, showing glimpses of impossible creatures and advanced technology hidden in a mountain. It went viral before being quickly scrubbed from the internet. Urban explorer forums buzzed with theories about Jake's fate and the secrets of Hollow Creek. Some dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. Others saw it as proof of long-held conspiracy theories. Deep in a secret facility, Jake Thompson sat in a sterile room, his mind both expanded and fractured by his encounter. He drew complex diagrams and wrote in languages no human had ever seen, muttering about the beings between worlds and the coming convergence. Agent Carter watched him through one-way glass, torn between fear of what he represented and hope for what his knowledge could offer humanity. The secrets of Hollow Creek Mine had been contained for now, but the door to other dimensions had been cracked open, and there would be no closing it again. Among them appeared an older figure, a nun with a cruel face that Olivia recognized as Sister Mary Catherine. The spectral nun spoke, her voice like ice. "Another lamb for the slaughter. The darkness must be fed." Olivia's academic skepticism crumbled in the face of this supernatural horror. She scrambled to recall protective measures from her occult research. Fumbling in her bag, she found a piece of chalk and quickly began drawing symbols on the floor around her. The ghosts pressed closer, their touch like ice on her skin. Sister Mary Catherine laughed, a sound devoid of all warmth. "Your pathetic attempts at protection are useless here, child. The darkness has ruled this place for centuries." But Olivia wasn't trying to protect herself. She was attempting to communicate. The symbols she drew were an ancient form of spirit communication. As she completed the circle, she spoke in a shaky but determined voice. "I am not here to feed your darkness. I'm here to bring light to your stories, to expose the truth." The ghostly children paused, confusion replacing the hunger in their eyes. Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger. Tell me what happened here. Let me be your voice in the world of the living. For a moment, there was silence. Then, like a dam bursting, the spirits began to speak. They told of years of abuse, of rituals meant to purify them that only brought pain and death. They spoke of a dark entity that Sister Mary Catherine had summoned, promising its souls in exchange for power. As Olivia listened and recorded, the air in the chamber began to change. The oppressive darkness lifted slightly, replaced by a sense of unburdening. The children's spirits grew brighter, more defined. Sister Mary Catherine's ghost howled in rage, her form dissolving into a mass of shadows that tried to engulf the children. Olivia, acting on instinct, stepped forward and completed her chalk circle, enclosing the nun's spirit. Your time here is done, Olivia declared. You will face justice in whatever afterlife awaits you. With a final, unearthly shriek, Sister Mary Catherine's spirit vanished. The children turned to Olivia, their faces peaceful for the first time. Thank you, they whispered as they faded away. Olivia found herself alone in the chamber, the candles extinguished. Her recorder had captured everything. In the months that followed, Olivia's research shook the academic world. Her evidence led to a full investigation of St. Agatha's history, uncovering decades of abuse and cover-ups. The victims were finally given a voice, their stories told and remembered. The orphanage was eventually torn down, the land cleansed and turned into a memorial garden for the lost children. Olivia's book on the subject became a bestseller, bringing attention to the darker aspects of institutional care in the early 20th century. But Olivia was changed by her experience. She continued her work as a historian, but with a new focus on exposing hidden injustices and giving voice to the voiceless, both living and dead. She never forgot the children of St. Agatha's and the night she helped set their spirits free. Olivia Chen, a 32-year-old historian specializing in early 20th century social institutions, had always been drawn to the forgotten stories of the past. When she received a grant to study the abandoned St. Agatha's orphanage in upstate New York, she thought it would be a straightforward research project. She couldn't have been more wrong. St. Agatha's, a sprawling Gothic revival building, had been closed in 1963 under mysterious circumstances. Locals avoided the place, whispering about the cries of children still echoing through its halls. As Olivia approached the iron gates, a chill ran down her spine despite the summer heat. The orphanage loomed before her, its windows like dead eyes staring down at her. She shook off the feeling and entered, armed with her laptop, camera, and digital recorder. The interior was a time capsule of decay. Faded murals of saints peeled from the walls, and dusty toys lay scattered as if the children had just left. Olivia began her survey, meticulously documenting each room. In the former headmistress's office, Olivia found a locked drawer. Her lock-picking skills, learned for just such occasions, came in handy. Inside, she discovered a leather-bound journal. It belonged to Sister Mary Catherine, the last headmistress of St. Agatha's. As Olivia read, her blood ran cold. The journal detailed horrific treatments for troubled children, exorcisms, ice baths, and something called the binding ritual. Sister Mary Catherine wrote of a dark presence in the orphanage, one that demanded sacrifices to keep the other children safe. Suddenly, Olivia's digital recorder picked up a sound, a child's laughter, distant but clear. She played it back, her hands shaking. There was no mistaking it, but she was alone in the abandoned building, wasn't she? Determined to find the source, Olivia followed the sound. It led her to a heavy door hidden behind a bookcase in the library. The door opened to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Heart pounding, Olivia made her way down. The temperature dropped with each step. At the bottom, she found herself in a circular chamber. Faded markings covered the floor and walls, symbols she recognized from her studies of occult practices. In the center of the room stood a stone altar. Dark stains marred its surface. Olivia's historian mind battled with her rising fear as she pieced together the evidence. This room had been used for rituals, dark, blood-soaked rituals involving children. As this realization hit her, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. Candles around the room flickered to life, their flames an unnatural blue. The air grew thick, and Olivia found it hard to breathe. Ghostly figures began to materialize. Children in old-fashioned clothes, their eyes hollow and accusing. They surrounded Olivia, their voices a cacophony of pleas and cries. "Help us," they begged. "Free us."